They should make Puerto Rico, D.C. a state, and they should expand the Supreme Court to 13. Eat our dust. The only way to fight this is don't run on it, don't talk about it, just do it.
Don't run on it, don't talk about it, just do it. And I think it's time to sort of put the sabers down with each other and just recognize the threat that we're up against, that quite, with no hyperbole, I could say, if the policies being pushed by some of these major Democrats come to fruition, it is the end of this country as we know it. It is irreparably destroying the Constitution in ways that we have no idea what could look like even 10 years from now. That's how quick it would be.
I mean, I think if you've watched this show for a while, you'll know that I'm not prone to hyperbole about stuff like this. Even when, Rob and I disagree about things like political prosecutions, I'm typically the one saying no. This is, let's see if we can be cautious. Let's see if we can preserve the norm. That's typically my role in this show. And I'm telling you, this is not the time to take things cautiously. This is increasingly becoming a dire situation. And I hope coming from me that resonates, because what's happening now, and if you probably have intuited it based off of the title of the stream and what Rob and I are warming up to, is that the left is openly campaigning on packing the U.S. Supreme Court. They want to add, and this is not like a fringe lefty position. This is Representative Khanna before the Congress speaking, given public remarks, which we could pull up if you want to, Rob, where he says he wants to expand the court from 9 to 13 justices, to add 4 liberal justices to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the threat to our rule of law and the threat to our way of life, if that were to happen, if that were to be permitted, is very, very difficult to understate. We're going to get into it during the show and we're going to wax poetic on it. But this is, without hyperbole, this is worse than anything they have ever accused Trump of doing. It is even if he did the worst thing that they've accused him of doing, it would be better than this. This is one of those red lines in the sand that you ought not cross. And they're running at it full speed, and something has to be done. The people need to wake up.
So let's start with this. We'll set this up a little. Left has been getting more and more extreme. The Democratic Party's been getting more and more extreme, not just with sort of the people on the ground and their rhetoric and sort of violent interactions, confrontations with ICE, et cetera, but in this show, we're focused more on the legal. There's been some, for all the black pillars out there, with the Trump administration, there's been some huge court victories for Trump in the last administration. Roe v. Wade being overturned, Chevron deference being overturned. Now we have the sort of Voting Rights Act, the racial gerrymandering overturned. This in its own could cost the Democrats 20 seats. I saw today, what's her name? I can't remember the name of the woman, but she was a Democrat, and she said the real problem's not just the federal seats. Democrats stand to lose almost 170 state legislators without racial gerrymandering, which is a huge blow to a lot of these state courts. Then you had, obviously, the gerrymandering case where Democrats spent about $40 million in Virginia that we talked about last week, that the Virginia state court. And so now they're at this point where it's sort of, the emperor has no clothes. All pretenses have been dropped. So let's start with just a couple videos. These, and I think, Ryan, and you could talk a little of this right as we play. We'll start with Khanna. These aren't fringe Democrats. This isn't if Thomas Massey says something, I'm not even insulting Massey. I'm just saying you don't really think of Massey as the heart of the Republican Party, or for that matter, some left-winger, some Democrats that aren't at the heart of it. These are people at the heart of the Democratic Party, both in politics and in the media, that are now suggesting doing this. Here he is in front of Congress.
Mr. Speaker, the Supreme Court is engaged in an ugly recidivism to deny black political representation in the South. Not since 1877, when Rutherford Hayes ended Reconstruction, have we seen as fast a rollback of political rights for black Americans. The moral light has been extinguished from the Supreme Court. That is why we need term limits for Supreme Court justices. 18 years and you're out. That is why we need to expand the court from 9 justices to 13 justices, like we have 13 circuits. The next time the Democrats have power, we need to actually take action, not just appoint commissions. As we approach the 250th year anniversary of our nation, we need a modern Supreme Court to uphold our nation's principles.
He gives the game away there, right? The next time the Democrats take over. If it's really just about having as many justices as there are sort of districts, wouldn't you say Trump needs to do this now? Of course not. This is imperative it happen when we take over. We need to appoint them.
When they take over, and Rob was alluding to this, but just to like circle back to some of the things that Rob said, Trump's picks to the Supreme Court have changed the country dramatically for the better. Colleges are no longer able to overtly racially discriminate against white and Asian students. That's a good thing. The unelected bureaucrats in the unconstitutional fourth branch of government, the administrative state, no longer have total unaccountable power over your daily life because Chevron deference was overturned. You're no longer allowed, the southern states are no longer held hostage by the VRA and playing by a totally different set of rules to give the Democrats a partisan advantage while they force the South to actually gerrymander on the basis of race, which is what was happening. And everything that Trump has accomplished, even think about like his immigration reforms, think about closing the border, think about his efforts to end the temporary protected status programs and these endless waves of refugees. These are all things that are enabled by the Supreme Court. And these are all things that would go away. They would go away if Ro Khanna had his way. But that's not all. Remember Joe Biden with what was happening to conservatives on social media under the Biden administration? Remember what happened with COVID? Remember the student loan debt forgiveness? Remember when they tried to shut down the coal industry overnight without even casting a single ballot on the question? Remember all these things that they did that were stopped because we have a generationally great Supreme Court. And this Supreme Court is going to be the centerpiece of Trump's legacy because they're generationally great. And the left want to replace it with 4 more Justice Jacksons. And we'll get into this tonight, Rob, but like Justice Jackson is, I mean, when people complain about the right being a partisan court, they're projecting, they're describing her. She is down the line partisan, has a dangerous judicial philosophy, and wants to rule the country from the bench. And that's expressly what the left is teeing up for us, Rob. So this is, I can't overstate the seriousness of this.
So, and just one of the things I think is funny, the left speaks out of both sides of their mouth, right? On one hand, they'll correctly point out when the Supreme Court has ruled against Trump as evidence of Trump's lawlessness. Tariffs, for example, right? The ability to deploy the National Guard, the Kilmar, Brega, Garcia, all of that stuff. See, that proves Trump's lawless. Then on the other hand, they'll say, this court's so in Trump's pocket, they're so corrupt. Well, you can't have it both ways. If they're literally on, look, I think that the border probably you would say was Trump's biggest like domestic issue that he was running on. Number 2 is tariffs. The court ruled against him on that. Right. So the idea that this is just like a Trump court, certainly they wouldn't have ruled against him on that key issue if they were really at the beck and whim of Trump. So as always, it's hilarious that the sort of the projection that you see from these Democrats that's like, justices like, Roberts, Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, they're so corrupt. They're in Trump's back pocket. We need more justices like Jackson or Sotomayor or Kagan. And you're like, but they're way more partisan, like even to different levels. So if you don't like Ro Khanna, like just to give you an idea of the different types of people, this is James Carville. James Carville, one of the architects of Bill Clinton's win, and he's been someone who's influential as a behind the scenes sort of campaigner, working on campaigns for Democrats for years. Here's his take.
The Democrats win the presidency in both houses of Congress. I think on day one, they should make Puerto Rico, D.C. a state, and they should expand the Supreme Court to 13. Eat our dust. The only way to fight this is don't run on it, don't talk about it, just do it.
Don't run on it, don't talk about it, just do it. And this is very similar to Abigail Spanberger, in Virginia that famously was like, oh, if I win, I'm a moderate. We're not going to redistrict in Virginia. And then as soon as she won, she was like, of course, that's what we're doing. Tough luck. So here you go. There's Carville. That's sort of the old guard Democrats. So don't think necessarily as much Obama Democrats. This is more like Clinton Democrats, right? That's their opinion. But as soon as you get in, pack the court, make DC Puerto Rico a state.
And look at that, Rob. Like you nail on the head. You called it earlier, right? Like they just want to win. They don't care. Like not only 13 Supreme Court justices, but make 2 more states so that they can control the Senate forever, right? Like they're talking about installing a uniparty. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about prolonged democratic rule for the good of democracy. For the good of democracy, we've got to make sure that the Supreme Court is full of partisan toadies and that the Republicans never get power again. For the good of democracy,
right? And so then you have that, and like, so all right, if you don't like that, how about the former candidate for president for the Democratic Party? Let's hear what Kamala Harris had to say.
This is a moment where there are no bad ideas. A no bad idea brainstorm is what I'd like to call it. And in that no bad ideas brainstorm, we talk about what we need to do and think about doing around the Electoral College. We talk about the idea of Supreme Court reform, which includes expanding the Supreme Court. We invite a conversation about multi-members districts. We talk about, that if we win the Senate, which we should and we will, then the Senate Judiciary Committee should have rules that they put in place so when these people come before as nominees to the Supreme Court and lie, that they are held to account and consequence. Not just that somebody goes on cable news and says they lied, but that there are rules in place to actually penalize people for lying to a Senate Judiciary Committee. That we agree that it is right to have ethics rules for Supreme Court justices. And let's put those in place. Let's talk about statehood for Puerto Rico and DC. These are the things I think that we've got to do. We've got to neutralize these red states from cheating, including blue states expanding their maps. And all of this, I think, is look, we got to fight fire with fire.
Sounds like she just fell out of the coconut tree with those sort of.
I mean, first of all, I'm calls to mind an Adam Sandler movie. Like nowhere in that long-winded rant did I hear the semblance of a good idea. We are all dumber from having listened to you. God have mercy on your soul.
Yep.
But beyond that, if you really listen to what she's saying, that's even worse than the Carville one. She said she was saying when a Supreme Court justice is appointed, imagine they're appointing a liberal justice. They say, if we put you on the court, do you promise that if we bring a case that says the Second Amendment doesn't apply to self-defense, that you're going to overturn Heller and you're going to get rid of the Second Amendment? And they say, yeah, we agree with that. And then the Senate, she thinks the Senate should have the, by the way, completely unconstitutional power to enforce that. Like you said, you were going to do it before when you were in nomination. So if you don't vote for us when we bring the case before you, we can punish you. She doesn't want an independent judiciary. She overtly said right there, she wants a judiciary that the Senate can punish for disobedience.
Jefferson, $2. I promise I'll get to the other chats too, but he says her ideas were written on the bottom of the bottle. I was talking to Andrew Wilson about this last week, this specific quote, and he's like, something he brought up, which I thought was interesting, is like, this is antithetical to the entire idea of a judge, right? Because the idea would be, you may have your opinions, right? Like, I was talking to you the other day, like, let's say I get elected as a justice and I'm like, I'm against eminent domain. Mm-hmm. I think it's always unjust. And then a case comes before me and I listen to the arguments from both sides and I'm persuaded. Oh, well, I hadn't thought of the arguments this way. Isn't that in effect what a judge is supposed to do? Consider the argumentation from both sides, which means there are times where you're going to be like, look, my framework remains the same. I'm an originalist, but I'm convinced that I now have an understanding of how this fits into that framework. What she's saying is just like, we ask you, okay, if a case came up about abortion, you would say women should have to have an abortion, right? Yep. So that means that if all new evidence comes out, right, and let's say that, the case comes from the Supreme Court and it's like, look, there's consciousness at 2 days after conception. There's pain. Wouldn't matter. We can't consider any of that because I promised Kamala Harris that I'm pro-choice. That's all that matters,
And she can discipline me.
Right.
The Senate can. And by the way, like, this is for those of you who, this may seem like, if you're deep in the Constitution, this might seem very basic, but just to give you the framework, Article 3 of the Constitution creates an independent judiciary, right? Congress isn't even allowed to dock federal judges' pay. They can't reduce it. They can't dock their pay. They can't, they get to hold their office for their whole lives during good behavior, quote unquote. And the reason for this is that we want to have an independent judiciary. We want to have a court that is going to, on the basis of their understanding of the law and the Constitution and American values, make the best decision they can, as Rob was describing. The idea of having courts that are lapdogs, that's what she's talking about. She's saying she wants to have courts that are lapdogs to the Senate and are not independent. That is, I'm trying not to be hyperbolic, but that is as un-American as it gets. It's as un-American as it gets.
It takes away the entire purpose of the judicial branch, right? Because in effect, the legislative branch would just say this: here's the law. And anytime the judicial branch is like, oh, that law that you all just passed, we actually don't think that's constitutional. Clearly, there would be the votes in the legislative branch to be like, we disagree with you, so we're going to punish you, right? Yeah. Which would in fact mean that there is no check on the legislator writing anything that could be deemed unconstitutional, because they would always have the authority. It'd be like this. Imagine that you have referees in a basketball game, but each team gets to determine whether or not they're fired at the end of the game. They're going to be like, oh, okay, I'm not going to call, or I guess one team. Yeah. I'm not going to call any penalties on that team because they could fire me. So I'm just going to let it go. I'm not going to. That's how insane this is. It really is.
Well, can I pull up this my screen?
Yep.
Again, guys, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I just want, my God, look how many tabs I have open. I want to give you guys a sense of how truly crazy this is. This is the Declaration of Independence, right? You might know this document, pretty famous one, 1776. We told King George to fuck off. At the beginning, the first two paragraphs, they describe our American philosophy. I talk about this a lot, but it's not what I'm looking at today. Then there's a list of grievances. What are the things that King George did that were so bad that it justified the American Revolution? What are the things that were just so awful that it could not be countenanced? He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. King George made the judges dependent on him, and they made the judges his toadies, so there was no rule of law. There was no justice. And this was a grievance so extraordinary, it made it into the Declaration of Independence. And Kamala Harris is transparently saying that she would like to put this system back in place. She would like to have a system where the Senate gets to control the judges, right? And again, this is why, our founders wrote that they, literally went to war against England about this to right these wrongs, and said that for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. On their sacred honor, Rob, they were going to fight a revolutionary war to stop the exact behavior that Kamala Harris is, glibly describing as a good idea because Republicans are cheating, because for once the Democrats aren't getting their way on everything. Everything. It is wildly inappropriate.
No, Ryan did not vote for Kamala Harris, I believe is the answer, correct?
I did not. I famously preferred Trump. I felt the need to sit that one out because of my views on the slate of electors issue. But there was no world in which I voted for Kamala Harris, because the the nightmare she was going to unleash was very obvious.
Now what you can see is, and we're going to talk about exactly what it could mean if they pack the court, like literally what that could look like, but you can see that it's not limited to that. For example, in Virginia, they're talking about putting an age cap at like 52 years old, I think, which would get rid of all 7 justices because they voted against the gerrymandering by the Democrats, even though it's a 4-3 court, Democrat appointed, right? So they're suggesting that. Here we have probably the front runner for Democrats for president, Gavin Newsom. This isn't about packing the court, but you can see a theme here. In California, they have a process where it's this really weird, archaic process that was put in place to ensure Democrats maintain perpetual power in the governorship. And so their rule is that the top 2 people after sort of a certain point are the only 2 that are on the ballot. And so that means normally it's 2 Democrats. So it's Democrat versus Democrat in the general election. Right now, it's Republican and Republican. They're at the top 2. So what are Democrats going to do about it? Here's Gavin Newsom.
We all have agencies. We can shape the future. There's still a lot of, look, I've said this before, so I'll repeat it. I don't anticipate this need to be the case, but there is a break the glass scenario. And there's many people that have a deep understanding of what it would look like if Democrats were locked out. And we're going to do everything to make sure that doesn't happen.
There you have it. There you have it. Well, if the rules we set up lead to us not winning, then we're going to change the rules mid-election. We have the agencies. We'll make sure that a Democrat ends up in office, come hook or crook. Now, Trump said something like that. There'd be riots in the street. But here's the leader of arguably the biggest state, I think the biggest state when it comes to sort of economics in the United States. And they're just proudly announcing, trust us, it's not going to be Republican. Trust us. We'll do what we can. We have access to the power.
Well, it's such a joke. It's such a joke. I mean, and you've been showing, and we're gonna pick on streamers too. Don't worry about it.
Yep,
like,
we're getting there.
You're showing like mainstream politicians saying stuff that streamers should be ashamed to say. You know, basically saying that, like, for the sake of democracy, we are entitled to cheat. For the sake of democracy, we are entitled to rig the system so that Republicans can never win again. And when I say that the stuff they're proposing is worse than anything Trump did, that's what I mean. Like, they're attempting to create legal structures that would lock Republicans out of power in perpetuity. Right?
Yeah, not just one election, right? And as much as you hated sort of Trump and like electors, we're talking about one election. Packing the Supreme Court and the mechanisms that they're suggesting here would literally entrench Democrats in power for generations. In fact, I don't even know what legal mechanism you would use to get out of it. Well, I really don't.
That's the thing, Rob. Like, if you do something horrible and it's illegal, at least people have the recourse of going to the court, right? At least there's a process where you can try to get vindicated. If people change the law to be tyrannical, if people remove your ability to go to court to be vindicated when you're being tyrannized, what are you supposed to do? Right? They've boxed you out of the system. And this is why this is very, very different. Like, you and I have gone 10 rounds a few times on things like political prosecutions, right? And I always talk about caution in those moments because I think there's room to play it out, right? Like, there's like, okay, maybe we can de-escalate. And if I'm wrong and there's another political prosecution, that would suck, but it wouldn't be the end of the country. This is like, there's not a lot of wiggle room here, Rob. Like, if they did all the things that you just put in these video clips, 13 Supreme Court justices, stacked liberal bench, every rubber stamp, controlled by the Senate. If they ever dissent, then they can be punished by the Senate for dissenting against the views. Lock down control of the Senate because DC and Puerto Rico are now, Democratic strongholds. They have 54 votes in the Senate, no matter what happens. Perpetual majority. What are Republicans supposed to do in that situation?
Look at it this way, right? We saw how in Colorado they tried to keep Trump off the ballot. Let's say Democrats come up with a reason. They pack the court. They win in 2028, right? They pack the court. 2032 is coming. Ron DeSantis wins the Republican primary, right? And he's looking strong. And Democrats say, actually, Ron DeSantis, from his time as governor, engaged in racist gerrymandering, right? And so our interpretation is to engage in abject racism means that you cannot be on the ballot for a federal position. And the Supreme Court goes, that it now has 19 members, says, yep, you're right. Now what? What's the recourse? DeSantis says, nuh-uh. Okay, where are you going to appeal that? That's the Supreme Court. Sorry. End of story. And like it's like, now take that with every issue, not just who could win elections, who could run. How about this? Like, what about my Second Amendment? You know, who gives a shit? We'll just keep putting justices on there and threaten to punish them until they say, you know what, that doesn't really matter. It only was talking about muskets. So your revolvers, your shotguns, your ARs, all gone, all of it. What about my First Amendment right to speech? Well, that wasn't applying to disinformation, right? No. I mean, you could literally, any single issue that you've heard Democrats push for, well, we want citizenship for illegals. But wait a minute, there's constitutional challenge to that. No, there's not. The court disagrees. And it doesn't matter if you could have every scholar in the country say, whoa, 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 that's wrong. That's blatantly wrong. Who gives a shit? Your opinion doesn't matter. The justice. And like, you know, I promise we're going to get the super chats right after this. It really does lead to a position where it's like, I don't see, as much as I hate to say this, I don't see a legal way out at that point. The only way I see out is if I try to envision a way without violence of getting out of it, it will basically just be states like, we refuse to accept this. We're just not going to. And we're going to secede, or we're just going to force the federal government to come in with the military and force these rules upon us, because we're just not going to do that. I'm sorry, no. And I don't know what happens then. We start to lay the conditions very similar to the Civil War, where you just have states. It's not going to start with like people shooting on the ground. It's going to start with them being like, we just can't abide by these rules because it's been nakedly, you know, partisan in the way that you guys have secured power.
Well, this is why I showed that section of the Declaration of Independence, Rob, because like it's exactly what you're talking about historically. Like, you know, if our founders could have gone to the courts of the time and said, hey, you know what? It seems like there's a problem here. King George is taxing us and we're not getting represented. We'd like to go through a legal process to get our rights. We'd like, you know, we might still be English, you know, like, but there was no legal process. There was nothing they could do to be vindicated through a legal process because the mechanisms were stacked against them and stacked in favor of King George, which is why that was listed in the Declaration of Independence. And the thing about what you're getting at, Rob, is, you know, if the rule of law means nothing, if it means nothing at all, if it's just nakedly partisan judges appointed en masse who are suddenly reversing everything and taking away all the rights that you hold dear, and you have no recourse, you have nothing you can do, there's nowhere you can go, there's no process you can avail yourself of, then why would anyone listen to what the law says? It would be silly, right? And that's why this is a very different kind of threat. This is not the sort of thing that you can take lying down. Like, this is the sort of thing that nobody should be willing to say out loud because it's a red line. And if you cross it, you're getting into extraordinarily dangerous territory. So I don't know, Rob. I mean, I'm hoping that maybe they get like this polls badly or they back off. But like right now, it seems like they're barreling towards this full speed. And can I tell you a story?
Yeah, sure.
I'm rambling.
Yeah.
I was talking shit about Destiny the other night because I was reviewing some truly awful legal takes he took, but it's indicative of this problem. Remember when they tried to take Trump off the ballot in Colorado?
I did.
They said, oh, Trump's an insurrectionist. Colorado says so. And it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court looked at the Constitution and said, I mean, like, you can get into all the legal reasoning, but even as a matter of just common sense, if one state can take the president off the ballot, then all states are going to start doing it. And we'll never have another presidential election. It's going to be an absolute shit show forever. It's an untenable rule. It is a disaster waiting to happen. And the court ruled that was unconstitutional 9-0. 9-0, right? Now, Destiny is a music major who used to clean carpets and looked as, now he has a big stream. And he's sitting there going, oh, I can't believe it. The law's all vibes. The Supreme Court they got it all wrong. They should have kept Trump off the ballot. I know this. In my heart, I know this. It's like 9-0. The 3 liberal justices also said this was a terrible idea. But you, Destiny, in your infinite wisdom with your carpet cleaning degree and your musicology, you know for sure that every member of the Supreme Court was wrong and you are right as a matter of constitutional law. And that's the sort of hubris we're talking about, Rob, where like even when the court speaks with a unanimous voice on the law, it's not good enough because they just want to win. They just want to win.
That's it. And like, by the way, as we speak, Destiny's over on his channel yelling about this very point, watching your video of it, analyzing his terrible points and making comments like, and this dude went to law school. Yeah. Yes, that's right. You know, and it you know, even Pisco went to law school, said he predicted they would rule against it, but it was a bad decision. They should have. By the way, using their same metric and their same definition of insurrection, we have had dozens of insurrections, this Trump term, right? And there were many Democrats that paid lip service to it. So can I gather a challenge here in Pennsylvania? You know, come 2028, when Gavin Newsom runs for office and say, I think he aided and abetted insurrectionists in California, I'd like to keep him off the ballot in Pennsylvania. They would say, yes, that's fair. You could do that. That's what it should be. Each state doing this every time. But of course they would say no, because we just want power. That's what it's really about. Jefferson C, again, $2 says as the New Deal fades, they bring back packing. Oh, excellent point.
And Jefferson's a man of history and pristine taste. Yeah, if you're not a big fan of some of the welfare state nightmares that we have as a result of the New Deal, if you're maybe worried that Social Security is bankrupting the country, how did that happen? FDR threatened to pack the court. It was unconstitutional until FDR threatened court packing. So Jefferson's right. This is a They ran out of steam from their last attempt to pack the court, so now they're cycling up the old favorites.
Look at this. This has been brought to my attention. There's Destiny live now.
Just super not clear to me. Sometimes, what did he say? Hold on. What did he say?
Hey!
Sometimes we have to deploy.
Let's get meta. Let's watch Destiny, watch you, watching me, watching him,
shit.
right?
Are we doing Inception reactions now?
I'm not. I don't give a shit. He knows where we're at, either of us. Don't worry, though. Hey, Destiny, if you're listening, you gonna tell everyone how you put me on a blacklist when you fucked up about that very Colorado court decision and didn't understand how they defined insurrection, and then you threw a fucking fit after a 5-hour debate where you said that you were going to debate me on first what you wanted, which was the definition of insurrection, and then second, how I said that there was an unequal application of how it's applied. Anything to tell your audience about the dozens upon dozens of insurrections we've seen now based on your own definition? Of course not. Of course he doesn't have anything to say about that. So it's funny though. It's sour grapes. Let's see. Call your boy Pisco, and you and Pisco could debate Ryan and me on this any day you want, as long as we have real things going on. But
I would be delighted. But this is like, look, since he's watching and he's probably seen the video anyway, I'll spoil the ending for his audience. If your take is the law is just vibes, and that's Destiny's take, right? Which makes sense because he's not somebody who believes in like moral objectives. He doesn't believe that there's right and wrong. He believes in vibes. If the law is just vibes, then why not stack the deck so you always win? That's his point. His point is the law is just vibes, so it should make sure that he's always winning. But you know what? Some of us actually care about the rule of law. Some of us actually think this is a big deal. And it's if the Democrats had any semblance of a high ground, they've lost it on this one, because what they are advocating for is worse. It's worse than the things they complain about Trump doing. It would be more harmful to America, more harmful to the American people, the end of the American experiment. And they don't care because it's vibes. All right. Well, unfortunately, if that's the direction we're heading, then we need to take this extraordinarily seriously.
I mean, the point is, they truly believe that they are good and moral and just people, and the rules don't apply to them. The ends always justify the means. And if you are someone who's fringe and isn't that likely to get power, then they don't care. They'll just laugh at you and mock you. Hell, they'll even support you if they think that you could become the face of the new opposition. So Marjorie Taylor Greene's cool now. New York Times, actually, right now, writing pieces about how we need Thomas Massey. because these are people they think, well, we could safely run against. They'll thwart Trump, which is what we need, and then we could safely run against them and we'll win. But as your ability to actually start making inroads culturally or politically increase, well, then the tactics that they're allowed to use against you increase. And so for the perspective of this show, talking about legal issues, if they take all these court cases and have all the ridiculous lower court judges that are trying to stymie the Trump administration at every moment, right? And all of this shit, and finally, after all said and done, huge losses for them at the Supreme Court when it finally gets to the top of the totem pole, well, then we need to redo the court. It's that simple. After all, we're good people and you're bad people. So everything we've accused you, and I told you this on the phone the other day, Ryan, we were sort of talking about things for the show. I said, mark my words, if the Democrats lose in 2028, I will guarantee, in addition to all the stuff they're saying now, one of the things they're going to say is, we should submit alternate electors. We should. They will. They'll say it with a straight fucking face. And they'll be able to tell you, like, no, the way we're doing it's legitimate. It's legitimate when we do it. It's always been the case with them. All of this shit about the rule of law and norms, they never believed any of it. It is really as simple as, fuck you, you're evil people, we're allowed to do what we want. That's it. It's that simple. And that's why they'll be able to make excuses. If Trump comes out tomorrow and says the following, here's the deal. I'm pushing forward legislation I want passed that says that the Supreme Court's limited to 9 justices, and I'm pushing for my slate of 4 new justices. I don't want to do it. But if the Democrats say, yep, the court should be packed, then fine, I'm going to do it. Right? Watch the Democrats scream, this is the most authoritarian thing I've ever seen. How could he even suggest such a thing? It's really just about power. They're entitled to power because they're the good people, and you're not entitled because you're bad. They'll tolerate you until you start to get access to those levers of power, and then the gloves are off. There's nothing they would be unwilling to do.
But the thing is, Rob, that's so important about this moment is that at least up until now, they at least went through the motions of trying to cloak it, right? They would say something like, oh, well, we're prosecuting Trump. Now, does prosecuting a former president open a whole can of worms? Is that going to lead to a cycle of political reprisals? Yeah, but okay, but like, he had the classified documents, right? Like, clearly this is justified in this one instance, right? Like, at least there was an effort, right? But now with this court packing thing, they're proposing something that doesn't touch one man. Like, let's say they convicted Trump. Let's say they convicted Trump and he wasn't able to run again. That would have been a terrible blow to, half the country that wanted the man to be president. It would have been, I think, wildly unfair, but the country would have continued, right? If you take away the rule of law, if you say the Constitution, like, have you ever read Russia's constitution, Rob? Russia has a beautiful constitution. It says the most lovely things. In Russia, people have the right to inherent dignity and education. They have, on paper, Russians have way more rights than Americans have. It's a lovely document. It's poetic even, but it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything because there's no independent checks and balances that would protect those rights. There's no structure that creates an actual system that allows those rights to be protected. And the Democrats right now are openly saying that they are hostile to that structure. They're hostile to the idea that there would be an independent judiciary because they know better. Right. And that's why I brought up that Destiny thing with the 9-0, because if you're mad about a unanimous Supreme Court ruling and you think you know better, you might be the problem. You might be the problem. When the court recently ruled against Trump on the abortion pill issue, I wasn't running around being like, oh, my God, this fucking rogue court. Why? Because a lot of justices I respect voted that way. And I haven't looked into it yet. And I assume they know what they're doing because I respect them. Like, it would be very odd for somebody to think on a 9-0 ruling that, fuck it, whatever. It's all vibes. I know better. Trump should have been off that ballot, LeMayo. Like, we're taking internet memes and now suddenly Senator Warren and Representative Khanna are saying them in the seats of power. It's a scary thing to hear of.